Hi, friends. This is a sermon called Family Reunions. It's based on Acts chapter 17, verses 22 to 31, and John 14, verses 15 to 21. It's being preached at Yellowknife United Church on May 10th, 2026, which is Mother's Day and Christian Family Sunday. As a disclaimer, the house where this sermon is being preached is being renovated right now, and it is an active construction zone. If there are background noises that I can't control, I apologize. So it's Mother's Day, and I want to share with you a reading from one of my favorite books on parenting, which is Frederick Bachman's Things My Son Needs to Know About the World. He's talking to his young child about his love for soccer. I'm not saying you have to play soccer. Of course you don't. I'm not going to be one of those dads who puts pressure on you and stands in the sidelines screaming and shouting. It's just that I love soccer, and I want you to know that this is all about love. I mean, I can see that you aren't all that interested right now. You actually seem to find dancing a lot more fun. And it's not that there's anything wrong with that. Not at all. Of course, you should dance if you want to. I'm just saying that life as a little boy will be less complicated if you play soccer. That I'm worried about the alienation a different choice might cause. That's all. It's just about being part of the group, feeling accepted. Now, Frederick goes on and on about soccer for about 5 more pages, and I won't spoil the end, except to say that this isn't going where you think it is. But we can pause here to agree on this core truth as parents. Kids don't always do what we want them to do. In fact, most of the time, kids don't do what we want them to do. They rarely take their lives in the directions we expect, and often they make choices we don't agree with. We worry about their safety, their judgment, their future. Have they really thought this through? Don't they understand the consequences? What was wrong with the path that we chose? And underneath all of that worry is something deeper: fear. Fear that the people we love will become strangers to us. Fear that they'll end up isolated or hurt. Fear that one day we won't understand one another anymore. I imagine this feeling is not unlike what Paul is experiencing when he arrives in Athens. By this point in the book of Acts, Paul's missionary journey has not exactly been smooth sailing. He has already been driven out of Thessalonica, dramatically, and then forced out of Berea too. In fact, the people from Thessalonica disliked his preaching so much that when they heard he was preaching in Berea, after they'd already expelled him once, they tracked him down there too, just to run him out of town all over again. So Paul arrives in Athens, exhausted, frustrated, and probably more than a little defensive. And Athens is, well, Athens, a city overflowing with philosophy and culture and statues and competing polytheistic gods. And Paul debates Epicureans and Stoics in the marketplace, and they call him a babbler. And they accuse him of promoting foreign divinities, which, to be fair, is exactly what he's doing. And then Paul notices something strange. Among all the shrines and monuments around him, an altar inscribed, "To an unknown God." I've never preached this text, but I love it because scholars are divided on almost every part of it. No one is sure if what comes next is a lecture or a sermon or a trial, but Paul gets up on the Areopagus and begins to address the crowd. And no one is sure what Paul is trying to argue about that unknown God. Is he happy to see humility among the Athenians? That despite their polytheistic God complex, they might recognize that there is something beyond them that they might not know? Is he trying to convince them that this is definitive evidence that what they have not yet discovered is the true God, and that the unknown God is actually Yahweh, who came to earth as Jesus? Or is he just ticked off to find yet another community who doesn't understand his message? Honestly, I sympathize with Paul. I think we all can, because this is what it's like when the people that we love and care about don't see the world the way we do. Even if we are not parents, most of us have had some version of that relationship. We have been mentors or teachers or aunts and uncles or friends or elders, and we know what it feels like to watch someone we care about wander into territory we don't understand, into the wilderness to find where demons dwell, as the song goes. We know that the frustration of thinking we know better, like Frederick Bachman, that our children's choices are misguided, that they can't possibly know the outcome of eschewing soccer in favor of gymnastics, but we know the world. Trust me, you want to say. I have seen more than you have seen, and I know that my path is the right one. Why won't you honor me by making the choices that I have made? Why won't you do as I have done? And most of all, why won't you listen to me? These feelings can become especially painful, I think, when it comes to matters of faith. Because let's face it, we mourn and lament that our children don't go to church, that our grandchildren have not been baptized. We wonder what will happen to this institution that we have built if they don't participate in it. And we raise them to participate in it, right? And sure, we feel that. But of course, it's not really about preserving the institution of the church. It's about wanting the people we love to experience the things that give us life. Many of us can tell beautiful stories of growing up in this United Church or another church, of church camps, of youth groups, of choirs and retreats and conventions that were holy grounds and mountaintops for us, the things that converted us or cemented our faith. Last year, I got to watch my son Alex perform in a UBC production of Jesus Christ Superstar. And I was sitting with some of his friends, and they kept leaning over to ask me questions about the plot. Wait, who is that? Why are they mad at him? Is Judas the bad guy here? What's happening? And I realized something surprising. The reason that I know the gospel story so well, and did too at their age, is because when I was 16, I performed in a production of Godspell. And to perform that musical is basically to memorize the Gospel of Matthew, to say nothing of the friends that I made doing that production and the fact that I met my husband, who was starring as John the Baptist. These songs and these stories lodged themselves permanently in our hearts. And as I sat there in the audience with Alex's unchurched friends, I realized that the things that feel foundational and obvious to me are not obvious to everyone else. Alex said as much as well, that when he came to a Good Friday service here in Yellowknife last year, after he finished Superstar, it was the first time he actually understood what was happening in worship, because for the first time, he knew the plot. This week, I was in St. Albert at Star of the North Retreat Center with 35 United Church clergy from BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. It felt a bit like a family reunion, the kind where you reconnect with siblings you don't see very often and meet cousins you've only heard stories about. And when that many ministers get together in one room, inevitably, eventually, the conversation turns to their churches and all of their assorted dysfunctions. Now, don't worry, I only say nice things about you, of course. Why won't Church A collaborate with Church B? Why is Church C fighting about this? Can you believe what Church D is doing? Some people are threatening to leave and join Church E. Wait, Church E? Who are they? Honestly, the whole thing sounded a lot like Thanksgiving dinner. So yeah, I do. I sympathize with Paul and Frederick. It's not easy being the shepherd. It's not easy being the parent. It's not easy when the generations clash this way. And it is not easy. It is really not easy. In fact, it is heartbreaking to see our traditions thrown out. And it's not easy being pressured to follow a path that you don't want to take. We cleave tightly to what we know, and we cleave tightly to what we believe is the best way. But beneath all the grumbling was something much more tender. People who deeply love this church, even when it frustrates the heck out of them. At one point, we were asked the question, what difference does the United Church actually make in your life? And I expected all the usual answers about inclusion and affirming ministries, and of course, that was a big part of the conversation. But there were other answers too. The church is one of the only places where people of all generations are friends with each other. The church is one of the only places where you don't need a credit card to enter the building. The church is a safe harbor for people who don't feel accepted anywhere else. The church is a great relief because here I don't have to prove my worth through success and performance. And then my neighbor said simply, I think the church saves lives. He was right. And I thought, imagine trying to explain that to Athens. Imagine trying to explain to people outside the church why this strange and flawed and frustrating family matters to us so very much. Paul tries, he really does. He takes several different approaches. He appeals to scripture, he retells the creation story through Hebrew eyes, he quotes Greek philosophers back to the Greeks themselves. It is here where we get the famous line, in him we live and move and have our being. But finally, after all of the arguments and all of the philosophy, Paul lands somewhere much simpler. But we are God's offspring. But we are his offspring. In other words, we are family, and we don't agree about everything, and we don't always understand one another, and we certainly don't preserve every family tradition exactly as it was. We are family because God claims us as family. And in John's Gospel, Jesus puts it another way. I will not leave you orphaned. I am sending you an advocate, a helper. And when I am gone, my spirit will remain with you. This is what families do. We hang on to one another. We help one another, even when we screw up and don't agree and get it wrong. I will not leave you orphaned. Not now, not ever. This week, one of the clergy I met was a minister who had come from Nigeria to serve 2 congregations in rural Manitoba, and he shared a truth that startled me. He said, I spent years trying to hold tightly on to my call, trying to stay faithful through all the difficult times, but eventually I realized something. It's not about how tightly I hold on to God. It's about how tightly God holds on to me. How tightly God holds on to me, to us. And there it is, the good news for all of us anxious parents and worried churches and frustrated generations. Maybe the future of the people that we love does not depend entirely on our ability to persuade them to go to church, to love soccer, to get a certain job, to have children, or anything else. It's not about how tightly we hold on. It depends on them being held and loved by us, but also by God. The church is not going to survive because we perfectly preserve our traditions or because we repopulate it and sustain it. God's family is held together by something much deeper than our understanding. There will always be false gods. Idols are all around us. There will always be things that pull our attention away from what matters most. There will always be things that lead us and our children in wrong directions. We will follow different paths. Some of them will even be mistakes. It has always been this way. It will always be this way. But there will always be something else, too. An unknown God. A revelation of the divine that passes our understanding and keeps us asking questions. And when we lack certainty, and when we lose our purpose, and when we don't know how to keep going, God shows up and holds us. I will not leave you orphaned. You are my child. You are my offspring. I will not leave you orphaned because families help one another. Frederick Bachman ends his reflection this way. Okay, you don't have to like soccer. You can play chess or sing. Hell, if you decide to devote all your time to that thing that they do in the Olympics, where they run about on a mat in a gym hall, accompanied by the Titanic soundtrack, waving 2 sticks with that kind of ribbon you used to wrap presents with at each end, I will come to every bloody training session. I'm just worried I won't understand it. I'm terrified of being left out. The awkwardness, the loneliness. Mine. Love isn't always fully understanding one another. Love is showing up anyway. Love is being willing to be a terrified soccer dad sitting in the audience for the ribbon dance in a sea of gymnastics moms, listening even when the language feels unfamiliar, and trusting that the Spirit of God is still moving among the people that we love, even when their path looks different from ours. Because Jesus promises this: we are not abandoned, we are not orphaned. We belong to one another because we belong to God. And even when you're sure that you can't hold on one more minute, God is holding you tight. So may God bless our homes and families and this church family, this Christian Family Sunday. Amen.